All right, guys, how are you? This is Pat Stedman from patstedman.com. The usual YouTube channel. We talk about dating and relationship issues and some esoteric stuff. We got a fun guest today. And this is Clint Francis. Now, Clint Francis has a very, very interesting life. Very, very interesting life. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring him on here. He was in luxury sales for 14 years. And we are going to be talking about sales and, of course, how sales relate to women. He did quite well with the ladies back in the day. And the only reason we're going to talk about this, but there's a big change in where Clint's been marketing himself recently in that department. And so, considering we've been talking a lot about dating markets recently and what kind of women you go after, we're going to have some interesting conversations about that too. But Clint's been, yeah, he's been in luxury sales for the last 14 years, and now he's pivoting to doing business coaching. And he's got some really, really great insights. You know that I'm a very spiritually, esoterically oriented individual, and I know a lot of you guys like that stuff. So we're also going to pick Clint's brain on some of those things. He's had the opportunity to actually meet and work in person with Dr. David Hawkins, who, as we all know, is the one who developed the original map of consciousness. So without further ado, Clint, it's great to have you on here. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, first, I want to say thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been on a journey since I'm 18 years old. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to go in the military. I tried college for a semester, and I just realized I didn't want to do more math and English. So I just wanted to go out and start living life. So I would travel down to Mexico and spend weeks down there. Sometimes I go with my friends' parents and them, and then going by myself as well. And I just felt like I needed to live. I'd been in the scholastic high tower, so to speak, and I wanted to go out and start experiencing life. Now, I'd had life experience, of course, during the time I went to school, but I wanted to go out and see different parts of the world and interact with different cultures and different people, because I was always been fascinated with people. So then that eventually, as I traveled around and had different life experiences, and of course I was on a spiritual path as well, but I really was living it in the sense that I was going out and having experiences. I would try to meet people and get out of just the theoretical aspect of all the things that I'd read that got me to want to go on an adventure in life. And so like in the 20s, I just experimented. I traveled around, I moved around, and I didn't really have any direction, so to speak, according to societal standards. So what I started to do was, okay, how am I going to start applying this in life? So when I was in my mid 30s, I started to do luxury sales. I'd done sales in the past, selling door to door like candy bars for baseball, selling men's clothing in high school, and no one ever really taught me how to sell. So I just felt weird. I felt I'm supposed to sell these people something. It feels like I'm trying to do something to them and take something from them without really giving anything. This was all just a cognitive dissonance or a subconscious conflict within me that I'm supposed to sell and I'm supposed to help people but then I'm supposed to take something. So I was on this journey, and I didn't do very well. I did okay and had some pretty interesting experiences. But when I started in luxury sales in my mid 30s, that's when I started to really become a student of sales, and then finding out it's a helping profession, finding out how you're actually helping people get over their own fears of buying things, or their parents have an idea of maybe they shouldn't buy expensive things, because I was selling expensive art and jewelry, and I grew up in a lower middle class home, so that was also a threat, because I felt like I'm selling them things that I can't afford to buy, so now I'm a phony. And now I have no credibility. So that was operating in the background, kind of like an app on your phone all the time, just popping up, of always feeling guilty. So I did all this stuff in my 20s and traveled around and went to different countries, not a lot, but a few countries, and then around the United States. And I was just always looking for, I was interested in universal truth. What was really the law? What was really the rules? And society has rules and man has his rules. What are the real rules of the divine, or the rules of the creator? And I've been obsessed with this question since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I was told that by my mother, that I'd asked her, what is infinity? And I had these kind of out there kind of things. So I didn't fit so well in school. I did okay, and I knew how to conform enough to perform, but my mind was always what is the real substrate reality that we live in, not on a scientific level of objective reality of where I could take two flasks and mix two different components and make something new, or not like that, more like what was really like the way that there was a famous spiritual teacher named Ramana Maharshi, and he said, people always look at the newspaper print, but they don't look at the newspaper for the answers, the actual paper that the words are sitting on. So that really fascinated. That's the only thing I can remember after reading his book, what he said. So there's all these things that were an impetus of trying to find out how human beings get along or don't get along or interact, mixed with what is this creator and what are its laws and how does it function? What can I learn about that? And then trying to make a living and exist in all that, and then going through personal development, discovering that, changing my mindset about what's possible for me, learning about the subconscious, the conscious mind. So I'm kind of giving you a long answer here, but it's been quite a journey of, in this context of trying to figure out what am I, why are we here, what is it, what are its laws, how do I self-actualize within this? That's really been my number one goal. And then of course I was living that, but then in the society there was a pushback, because I'm not fitting into doing what everyone's supposed to do, getting a college education, buying a house, saving for retirement. And yeah, those things are a part of life, but for me, it was kind of coming more later than early. So we all have our own unfoldment and trying to find my way within that.
Well, there's some people who would describe you as a first wave indigo warrior or whatever. I don't really love that terminology, but I have to admit that there's some truth to it. For those who aren't familiar with this background, there's a sort of theory, and I don't remember who said this, but about, maybe was it like Dolores Cahill or Dolores, I always mix up Dolores Cannon and Dolores Cahill, so I don't know which one of the two it is, but that there were these waves of souls that incarnated into Earth, and you had a couple of the individual wayfinders for a long period of time, like more like explorers, so to speak. But then we started to get with, from the 60s and 70s, this wave, which has been called, by this woman and other people, the sort of indigo first wave, right? Sort of like inherently awake, more developed souls, so to speak, that came in. And then the second wave came in the 80s and 90s, and then there's the third wave, and each of these waves have different sort of roles to play in the whole thing. But and I have a couple of friends, these guys are mostly in the boomer or Gen X generation, the first wave. And the one thing that's so crazy about this theory, because I've seen it play out with like my friends and colleagues like yourself, Clint, is that they really just had to eat shit. I mean, first on the beach, like really, like you're coming into a world that is actually pretty rough, pretty harsh, absolutely not ready to receive the message. And yeah, and from most of the individuals I've known who have this sort of, first wave, disposition, the early years of their life in particular were extraordinarily painful. And so if you don't mind, I think it'd be really beneficial to the audience, because, most of my audience are younger men, and we are living through, I mean, we're frankly living through the fourth turning. Maybe it's, the end times, you know what I mean? We're going through a massive swirl of dark and light on the planet at the moment. And a lot of my audience is very aware of this, but and they understandably feel like this is pretty tough situation that we're in at the moment. But I've heard a little bit about your past background, and it almost makes you think, even though, okay, yeah, this is so rough, and we're exposed to some serious mind control programming and psychological warfare today that maybe didn't exist as much in the past, but things were really tough physically, like survival wise, in prior generations and circumstances. So tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up back in the day, so to speak, and what are what lessons do you feel like men today are missing and could take from it?
Okay, well, I was born in 1970, so I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. I graduated high school in 1988. So I have my foot in the old world and the new world. I knew what it was like before computers and smartphones, but I can operate those things now, probably not to the ability of younger people, but I'm pretty decently savvy with it. And like you said earlier, there's these stages of people coming in. So just to, talk on a personal note here, my parents, had a normal, regular middle class life. My parents got divorced when I was 10 years old, and I ended up going with my father, and he wanted to raise me and my brother. Then we ended up moving to this bad neighborhood. So the thing is that in going to this bad neighborhood, I was totally unprepared to dealing with the kind of predatory people that were on that in that area. Across the street from us, we had a mafia operation that had corrugated fencing and barbed wire, and Ferraris and limos were coming in through the day and through the night. I ended up finding that out through the street knowledge. There was graffiti, and I was the only white dude in the neighborhood. It was a Hispanic, or what would be called a Latino neighborhood, because I grew up in Southern California. So I'm thrown into this whole new thing, and there's Samoans and there's Mexicans, and there wasn't black people, or there was a few Asians, but so there's this racial difference. There's a total different mentality difference. And so I'm trying to figure out, I'm learning Spanish. I'm trying to figure out how to survive. So I'm going to get jumped so I can understand what that is. So all of a sudden I'm thrown into this world that I do not understand. And when I was I was in this ghetto apartment building with this guy in his bedroom, and we were playing with toys, and I, was maybe 11 years old. And I remember making a decision at that time. My subconscious, I didn't know this at the time, made this decision that I was going to survive and that my life was going to be better when I was older. That was an intuition that I had. Like, when you get in your 40s, your life's going to be much better, but it's pretty much going to suck from here on out. So I went into this heavy survival mode, and my strategy was to be meaner, tougher, even though I really wasn't. But to really be meaner and tougher than anybody else, but also to not hurt people to the point of death. I didn't want to, and that never happened. I just was fighting and trying to survive, or running, sometimes puffing myself up like I was, tougher than I really was, and that worked. And playing on fears that other people had about because I'm 6'4", so playing on those fears, and I went into this very natural survival mode. And then, as I went through this, I'd been shot at. We were playing hide and go seek at the age of 12. And this drunk guy who was about 40 years old, he had a 44 because my dad had one. So I knew what they looked like, and I'd shot him. And so as a kid with my dad, and so he was drunk and started screaming at us, and then he just started shooting at us. So I'm running, and then bullets are flying. I know what that sound is now. Of a bullet, and plus a 44 has a pretty mean sound to it. It's like that. You watch old Clint Eastwood movies, you can hear that sound. It's very accurate. So that really put me in a heavy survival mode. So I was in such a hyper vigilant mode. So I got through school. I think I graduated with a B or a B minus average. So I was able to put it aside, compartmentalize it, and guys are really good at going to war. And it was like I wasn't, I've talked to veterans and whatnot, and I really relate to them, but I never say, I don't know what the war experience is like. I could say maybe it was more like guerrilla warfare in the sense, but it never ended. I didn't do 2 9-month tours and I went home to my family. There was this for 8 years. Constant violence and just thuggery and gang activity. And I never became a part of that. And when gang members would try to get me to join their gang, I'd say, you know who my dad is? My dad is a real tough character. He grew up in the 50s, and he was a very macho 50s guy, and you just didn't mess with him. So everyone was afraid of my dad. So that really helped me by saying, if I join a gang, my dad will do worse to me than you could ever do to me. So I was able to escape that world of being around very tough people. And then I had to learn how to deal with them and negotiate with them. So I didn't know I was having this happened to me, which would come in handy later in life. So if I couldn't beat, like, let's say Samoans were just very tough, strong people, man or woman. So you would have to negotiate with them because you're not going to fight them because you can't win. So I was really good, at English and different subjects that they maybe were struggling with. So I'd say, hey, I'll help you with your homework, and you put the word on the street that you don't touch. Hey, man, that's cool. We can do that. Or somebody will get left behind and say, oh, can you give me a ride home, when I eventually got a car? And I gave this Samoan guy a ride home, and he's like, hey, just mention my name, say you and I are tight, and they'll leave you alone. So I'm going through this and I hate it. I don't like it. I feel victimized. I feel angry. I feel put upon. And I mean, I can't even go in the short time we have to speak here into, but you can get the idea that I was in a very tough situation, which lasted pretty much from, let's say, 11 years old, 6th grade, all the way to when I was 20. But it felt like I was marked for death. I felt like even beyond on a spiritual level, like maybe you could say on a karmic level, that I'd done whatever I'd done in a past life, if you could theorize it that way. And this was the retribution. It was coming to me. That's in a way how I was trying to rationalize it in my mind so I didn't go completely crazy. Because there was about 8 or 9 years where it's any chance, and it was random strangers, because most people are killed by people they know, and that's a pretty statistical fact that's known. But these were all random people. I didn't know any of them, so it was just kind of like the general crowd was getting even with me or something from whatever I did in past life. So I was coming up, because I was reading spiritual books at the age of 18. I was reading a lot of more Hindu and Buddhist stuff, because I needed some out-of-the-box thinking on spirituality. And I later learned that those Eastern religions were not used as political weapons, so to speak, to control people. So that was it was just kind of more plain spoken, and not that I understood the terminology, and I had a Western psyche, so it was hard for me to understand what they meant when they used Eastern terminology. But I was just looking for answers, because the suffering I was going through by trying to navigate these bad neighborhoods and tough people, but I wasn't really seeing the gifts and the blessings at that age. But I was being prepared for life, and I think, especially like you mentioned earlier, the times we're going into, and the difficulties that are going to come. And what I'd also like to say to younger men is, I grew up in a more violent time. So Dr. David Hawkins talks about the harmonic convergence in 1987. Before 1987, the human consciousness on the planet was below 200, which is the first level of integrity, which is courage. So it was a lot more dangerous before 1987, but there was also a reality as a man. If I opened my mouth and I was disrespectful, somebody could smack it. Somebody could shoot me, somebody could punch me. And, beyond, punching and slapping, something could happen to them. But pretty much people were not suing people. There wasn't people charging people with assault. If two 16-year-olds were duking it out, you would usually that would settle it. Usually there wouldn't be this ongoing thing. And, people theorize why there's school shootings and all this kind of insane violence today. And I think a lot of it is that it kind of goes so far that the person goes Rambo and loses their mind, where if you punch it up a little bit in the schoolyard and nobody really stops you, and it's kind of seen as, this is what young guys do, and women kind of spread bad rumors about each other, and the guys, would punch each other out. But usually I ended up being friends with these guys that I had fights with. Some of them became very good friends. And I think that idea of manhood and being young in that era where you still could get hurt. And a lot of times I had older guys after me. When I was in 6th grade, I went to a soccer camp. And I was a really good soccer player. That was my best sport. And I was the captain of the team. And we were playing 8th graders, and we beat the 8th graders. So the captain came into the dorm and said, "You cheated," and bam, just cold cocked me right there. And, when you get hit there, you're dazed. And I couldn't fight, and I just got whooped. And then, like, my team, saw him in the shower and, like, rat-tailed him with all these towels. And so these kind of things happen. And then, of course, the counselors got us together and kind of went through an apology thing and a forgiveness thing, because it was I ended up going to a Christian soccer camp, at the time. And it was funny because we weren't even going to church or anything, but it was a really good camp, and I was a soccer guy, so it all worked out that way. But it's just interesting how we see this all as so brutal and bad. And I'm not saying it was good. I'm not saying violence or any of that is good. And I don't want to be misconstrued here. What I'm saying is that because you really had to kind of deal with it and get past it, and not have everybody telling you that it was so later in life. But I always say I preferred to grow up when I did, because it was just more real. And then when it happened, you just had to deal with it. And then, there was also a different thing, like sticks and stones can break your bones, but names would never hurt you. So all these, idioms were said, or ways of being were espoused, and you should never give up and keep moving, and don't let that stop you. So there was a show called That's Incredible, and it showed all these people overcoming the insane odds. Or there was a yogi who put himself in a little glass cube that was like this big, and he folded himself up. And then there'd be a person in a wheelchair saying, hey, I'm handy capable. I'm not handicapped. I can do anything. So I grew up, even though I at times felt like a victim and was pessimistic, for sure, having all this thing in the society saying, you can do it, go get them. And yeah, it might have been trite and it might have been platitudinous, but it really, I prefer that. And then you have to kind of maybe get some therapy or do some things to get over the trauma, whatever it is for you. But then I know what it's like to lose. There were 3 trophies, first, second, and third. I get beat up by, somebody, and then we just squash it like, okay, or you face a bully and you punch him, and then you and the bully are friends. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't all this obstruction of social media and online and a lot of judgment, a lot of people's opinions. And I always joke, in the late 80s, I was in Carl's Jr. and they had the first comment card I ever saw. And I saw it and I said, this is evil, because everybody's going to think their opinion matters. And it was like 3 questions, like, was the restaurant clean? Was the food good? And were you treated well? And I, oh man, I don't even want to fill this out, and I could see, and it was maybe 87 or 88, I could see where this was going even at that point. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure for the guys who are going to be listening to this, I mean, it's such a foreign world at this point. I mean, guys my age, we were still in the bridge with that. I did not grow up in a tough environment at all, so I'm not trying to relate it. But back then we did have some, there was still bullying and whatnot. And we, there was a period in late elementary school and, in middle school where there'd be basically like a fight club after school, and the guys would all, there'd be routine beefs, and people would, get hit or wrestle and stuff like that. And, I can look back at a lot of those times, and sometimes it was painful. Sometimes it sucked. But there was also a lot of growth in it. And I think what's really important, and what's fascinating, especially for the guys today, is how everything you described, I mean, the bully picks on you, then you throw a punch at the bully, and then you guys become friends. Beefs happening, beefs being quashed. I mean, that is how men operate, right? It's a very, very masculine way of operating. And back then, especially back in your early days, there was really a space for men to operate as men. And we have now entered into a period where masculinity is under some serious, serious attack. Everything is distorted, and actually I think what is commonly misconstrued is it's not even just that masculinity is under attack. Femininity is too, because femininity can't exist in a domain without masculinity, because femininity requires masculine energy as sort of like a protective barrier to flourish. And so now we have all sorts of people like, mental illness rates through the roof. Back at your time, I'm sure, there's a lot of traumatized people carrying a lot of pain, but it was not mental illness. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the distortion of reality we see today, and the kind of programming, programming back then. Oh, a man can be, you're capable, you can be whatever you want, if you put your mind to it. Whereas, the programming now is, well, I guess it's the same but different, right? You can be whoever you want, but with a little bit of a different twist on it. But the reason I mention that stuff is because I want to tie this into what you mentioned, very, very important point. In 1987, the planet passing this line of integrity, right? Where the consciousness of the planet jumped from the 190s to the early 200s in a scale. And my 2 questions for you. The first is a little bit more simple. Why did that happen? Why do you think that happened? Was it, these new sort of star seeds, these indigo, first wavers like yourself coming here that had a different orientation. What shifted then? Because we know, of course, that the Cold War ended soon thereafter, communism collapsed soon thereafter. But the other thing here, and this is a little bit more complicated of a question, but if just to take a stab at it, we had maybe more of a clear, a lot of the stuff now feels like it's a feminization, right? And you've been through these spiritual circles, and there's a lot of really great value in them, and a lot of really really wonderful people. I mean, people tease, but they really are wonderful people by and large. But super emasculated environment, 4 to 5 guy to girl ratio, and the guys there are usually very depolarized themselves, very afraid of masculine energy. And I find it interesting that you have this correlated rise in consciousness with this sort of feminine energy, right? But obviously it hasn't been all great. Something's off here. What exactly do you think is going on, and how do men deal with it? Because we can't go backwards, as you know. You don't want to send kids back to the ghetto kind of experience you grow up in. So where do we need to go from here?
Well, I think the first thing you mentioned was 1987 and the jump from 190. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but it was at 190 for several hundred years.
Yeah.
And so 190 really is a dangerous point because you have the ability to destroy a lot more stuff in a shorter period of time. But you don't have the courage to be smart and know when to keep your sword in the sheath and when to take it out. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think we had so much instability, the world wars and the revolution and the Civil War and all the things that happened up to 87. And even when I watched the movies before 87, people slapped each other all the time. And it was a lot more an acceptance of violence and a promotion of it, I would even say. So I think what happens is human consciousness seems to evolve over long periods of time. So like in the times of the Buddha, I think it was at 90. At the time of Jesus Christ, it was about 100. So a very brutal, short life. And yeah. I think people today can't even relate to that, even in a theoretical level. Mm-hmm. So I think what happens is over time, as we grow in consciousness on this planet, then we are kind of permitted or get access to higher levels of consciousness as a group, even though Hawkins said back when he calibrated all this that 70% of the planet is below 200. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't take a lot of people to raise the consciousness. And in America, it was about 50-50. And that's why you have the split and a polarization, I believe, here. Mm-hmm. So I think over long periods of time, now, the Indians talk about the yugas, but, and as it's cycling and seeming to never really evolve beyond. But I think, and this is just a stab at it, that we've reached a place where we made this really logarithmic jump to, it was like 203 or something like that. And so what that really means is people who cheat and steal everyone's 401k, like WorldCom and all that in the 90s, it's harder to get away with it. And there's going to be more of a divine justice, in my opinion, that's going to be behind this, to where everything in consciousness is recorded even before we had cameras. So everything is accounted for. Mm-hmm. So you really don't get away with anything on a spiritual level. But in this human plane, we have a justice system, and they're different all over the world. There's common law and civil, and there's all the different types. But I think making that jump, the way the world is going to change is autonomy is going to come back to the individual, because America is a country, because it's a common law country. It's even an improvement of British common law, that we are going to become more sovereign individuals. And even the economy is going to shift from going to big institutions, getting your health care from big institutions, and this kind of authoritarian control, to where more the way that Paul Zane Pilzer says it in God Wants You to Be Rich, which is a great prediction of what's coming, is that we're going to be 19th century economy with 21st century technology. So like the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, we're going to have our own computer, smartphone, 5G, 6G, as it goes on. We're going to be able to really control our own destiny. But of course, at the end of this era of total hierarchical control or authoritarianism or totalitarianism and all the judgments we have about and that I've had, as I go along, I see it's all part of the game. And if you can accept that that's part of it, then you can accept and you can navigate quicker and adapt quicker, because I think humans survive more through adaptation than even intelligence. So it's adapting to the new system as quick as you can, becoming an earlier adopter to what's happening. So as far as going from 190 something to 203, we had earned that ability through, the Magna Carta, going to the Revolutionary War, going to the inception of the United States and British common law and all that. As humans are ending slavery, humans wanting to have a more fair, a more, brotherhood among man, or whatever you want to say. I think there's an instinctual drive that most people are moving towards that. And even if they're hindered by their own shortcomings, they're trying to move towards that. So that first part of the question, I think that just, we've earned that by committing to higher level, higher moral ways of being. Even though we fall short, our intention is we want to make it a better, fairer place. And everyone has their judgments of how it should or when it should, but that's really beyond our scope and beyond really, I think, our knowingness of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's just interesting to me is that it seems like a lot of kids who are coming in now, and there's always been the nature nurture argument, but that a lot of kids coming in now, and I don't have a reference point except for my own sort of childhood and experience, but it just seems like okay, in some ways that they're definitely softer,
yeah.
But there also is with it a real, like, a lot of the kids are much more kind. Like, I'm not saying it's not like gone, and I'm not trying to be naive. I'm just, what I've seen observationally, there's less distortion in some ways with the youth. And I'm curious that if you were to take away a lot of the programming that's been poisoning them, what kind of, like, are these individuals coming in right now, are they coming in with a different level of consciousness? Because one of the things that Hawkins said, and it was always very, I think it's difficult to hear, and I'm not even entirely in agreement with it. I actually like to talk about this, but that people would only change their consciousness by a few points over the course of their lifetime. And I wonder how much of that had to simply do with the structures in place to allow that kind of expansion. Because I can tell you that since 2015, 2016, there has been a lot of movement in consciousness. And what has happened since 2020? I mean, the consciousness of the planet, it's funny because you hear all this stuff about how bad things are getting, but I have a good friend of mine who does muscle testing stuff usually, and individuals test the macro, and I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but I mean, by his estimation, I mean, we've moved into like the 2030s now, 230s, I mean, in terms of the consciousness, and that back in 2020, it was like 20 teens. Like, it's been moving up rapidly as a result of having to be exposed to all this darkness. And I can see for myself, I mean, it's like, it's almost disorienting to see how fast we're changing given this time period. So anyway, just something to springboard off of.
Well, what I would say is that you can take a beautiful piece by Bach, and you can have two people listen to it and get two different opinions. But is it beautiful in reality? Is it beautiful? I think the average person, something in them tells, like judges would say, I would know what a crime is if I see it.
Right.
So there, I think
porn versus art, right?
Whatever it is, there's a trusting in one's own GPS and I think we've been taken out of our nature through domestication, which has gone on since the beginning of time. And then in more tribal times, you just didn't have so much of it. And then as we become an established society, you're going to get a lot of brainwashing, and everybody thinks their opinions are better or that they have a better way. And even when systems have changed, even like slavery, for example, it had to be outlawed way before it was accepted. So there's always this push for a higher vision for humanity, but there's always the late adopters that drag it to go. And you could say some of that is indoctrination. You could say before the Gutenberg press and the church was saying everything in Latin and you couldn't understand it, but if you felt the presence of God in there, then you would get what you need. The words are just pointers to the presence, so to speak. We can go in all kind of directions like this, but when you say Hawkins, he said 5 points. And you got to remember, it's a logarithmic scale, so that's quite a bit, even though to us on a scale to 1,000, it looks pretty puny. But there's a whole bunch of things, and I think the human perception, so also the law of polarity, which is a universal law, states that, everything is present at all times and everything's created holistically, but we have a brain, we have an intellect that we can chop everything up into pieces and mistake them for being holistic. And I think if you want to look at today and say it's a terrible time, some people feel relieved when they're getting a divorce, and some people are terrified. So
that's a great analogy.
So I think we're putting our attention, because that's our survival. Our reptilian brain is to scan the environment for danger, and that's still alive and well. So when we're looking at what's going on, we all get sucked into focusing on the negative, because that's how we survive and that's how you get away from danger. And I think learning to discern the difference between that takes a lot of consciousness and a lot of space in yourself. So we could, there's this guy, I think he's from Denmark or something, and he is hired by the UN to analyze the problems of the world. And there's like 200 problems. And they say that the biggest problem is infant malnutrition in the whole world. It's not the environment, it's not war, it's infant malnutrition. So if you could get nutrition to an infant, maybe that person invents something that creates more peace, or creates a new invention for a new disease, or a new cure for a disease. So I think a lot of times we don't know what the problem is. We don't know where we are. So the first thing you have to do is find where you are on the map. If I take you and drop you off in the middle of the desert blindfolded, and then give you a map to where you're supposed to go, if you don't know where you are, you can't find it. So the first thing I think we have to do as humans is really know where we are. So where are we in history? Well, there are a lot of opinions. So listen to a lot of different people, and you have to put it together yourself. We grew up in an era, all of us, where everyone makes the decision for you. You're moving more towards self-autonomy. So now begin to take responsibility for that. Don't whine or complain about what you didn't get or whatever. Just start now, go there now, and start looking at it. And I think we're in the most interesting time of history, period. I can be nostalgic for the past, but I think it's the most interesting, but it's also the most confusing. But you have YouTube and Twitter and all these things where if you dig hard enough, you're going to find the truth, and you're just going to learn how to critically think and cross-reference things, and you will know the truth. And then you're going to feel bitter and judgmental about the powers that be that withhold it from you or whatever. But that's part of the journey. That's part of like going back to a man and his journey. A man's journey, like I love the idea of male initiation, where they break you from your dependence on your mother and they make you dependent on men. And it's not your dad, because you and your dad have too much of a natural kind of aggressiveness with each other. So it's grandpa, it's uncles, it's men of the tribe. They take you away for a year. They teach you how to hunt and fish and make moccasins. And then you come back and you never look at your mom and you never ask her directly for things, because they're trying to prepare you. And people look at that and say, oh, that's not really relevant to today. But we threw that out for whatever reason, and I don't know why, when we became very civilized. And even today, if you go to other countries, you'll feel the toughness of other people. Like they're still living in a physical world where they can still duke it out, where most Americans have been living more in a mental world, and they really couldn't duke it out, and they're becoming more in that, moving to that direction, but still imagining themselves to be the way they were at another time. So It's like really getting, where am I on the map? And then once you find where you are on the map, then you can decide where you want to go and go to that place. But I think as a species, we're facing possible annihilation, World War III, it's all possible at all times, or we could have a meteor strike us. So I think the thing to do is to, using the law of polarity, where there's always a negative, there's always a positive, there's always this side of the pen and that side of the pen. So if you're looking over here saying, oh my God, it's so horrible, oh my God, this is the end, and I want to go back to the 50s, or I want to go back to where we were in a tribe. No. Take a look, turn around and look here, and then you go, oh, all of this is opening up. And when you talk about the masculine and the feminine, I think women have to learn and to take care of themselves and all this stuff, because they used to be taken care of by men in the past. And men have to learn how to connect with their emotions, because I think today, if women can pay for their own way and they have their own jobs, their own businesses, then what is your advantage as a guy? Well, maybe you can connect well emotionally. Maybe you got a good sense of humor. Maybe you understand how all this works and you can be patient with them in a way that other guys can't be. So what is the third stage, or the new man? I think of David Data and other people I've listened to, So there's the old guy, you know, the biker guy who's get on the back of my bike and don't tell me where anything. I don't want to even hear where you want to go. And then there's the guy who's like, tell me where you want to go, sweetie. I don't know where I want to go. Where do you want to go? And then there's the guy who says, hey, we're going to go over here. And she's like, oh, we went there last week. You know, could we go somewhere else? Hey, yeah, that's a good point. We'll go here. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. So it's like, I think we're moving to that. But any kind of it's like a healing crisis. If you were really sick and you stopped eating junk food and smoking and drinking, your body's going to be like, oh, like I went on the keto diet a year ago and I felt horrible for 2 weeks, horrible. And I wanted to quit, but I wanted the reward of not being in insulin resistance and burning more from fat instead of insulin. And it's been a life changer. I lost weight. I feel healthier. I feel younger. But I had to go through that. And I think in my day, you had to go through pain. You had to go through struggle because we didn't have as much figured out. And you have to learn to be around people because there wasn't technology. I couldn't order a pizza and talk to my friend and just, you know, have my dog in my 1-bedroom apartment living by myself and I don't have to deal with people. And then you just keep pushing and then you're not dealing with reality and then you're living in the metaverse or you're living in a, you know, so that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the, you know, I know that a lot of people talk about how this new development is very feminine, right? And that, you know, they will associate the world before as being a very masculine world. And then what comes from that is this, oh, well, the world back then was lower consciousness. And so that was the masculine, and the feminine is more higher consciousness, because when you come up, you know, you connect more together. But I think it's funny because the way that is approached, you can just see how even mainstream programming seeps into it and distorts the understanding, because, well, base man and base woman on a physical level, men are going to dominate in that sense. But it's not as if like oh, men were just oppressing women and there wasn't some, you know, back and forth that was going on in terms of manipulation and women having their own sort of role in the dynamic. I mean, anybody who thinks that the base, like, women by their nature are just, you know, good people doesn't know enough about women, because men and women are both, there's always been really good, honorable men and then deceitful women, right? And you know, you look at these levels of consciousness things. What you say, I think, is very correct in that as we're moving into this more, you could say, unity, you know, we are, so as men, there is this element of internal unification with the feminine in terms of getting, you know, being able to manage emotions and express them better. But then also same with women in terms of being able to have a level of agency for themselves. It doesn't mean that they need to necessarily provide for themselves, but it needs to be not this sort of sense of helplessness. And I think that the big thing that distinguishes us now from maybe those early, more primitive societies, which had a more healthy balance and had more of a spiritual grounding, is that what we're layering into it now, and maybe this was the case before, but I suspect it wasn't, that we're very conscious of it now. It's almost as if these primitive more tribes, these indigenous tribes, they got it, but they got it on a super unconscious level. And then as we've gone through this process of civilization, it's like it was like left behind and suppressed, and it wasn't integrated. And now we kind of reach this end point of it, where now we either reset or we reintegrate, and we bring all that stuff and we're aware of it. So anyway.
Well, I think that it's seeing it not as a problem. And I think that's what makes us have so much existential angst. Like for women, you know, a great author for women to read if they're on here listening. And Marion Woodman was a fantastic author who wrote in the 1980s and also toured with Robert Bly, and they would have the women in one room and the men in another, then they would bring them together.
Did she write that book, Dancing with
Yes.
Yeah. What was
Yes,
her
she.
example?
I can't remember the name. It's been too long because I read her book like maybe 20 years ago. I was more interested in the man stuff because being a man, I figured I better learn out my problems first before I start looking at it. So when I mentioned earlier about the biker and the nice guy and then the nice guy with balls or whatever you want to call it, the third stage man. I mean, these aren't my ideas. It's just things I've read, but they made sense to me. So for the woman, it's really prostitute, the split, the working
Not
career
true.
woman, today.
Yeah.
And then there's a woman who's like a beautiful flower and she just smells good and she just looks beautiful and all the men come to her and she can make her choice.
Yeah.
I think that's where women are moving to. But if they're needy or feel inferior because they can't make their own money and all this kind of stuff, I think this is all right on time. And that's why it's such a feminine feeling time right now, because men are getting into learning how to connect emotionally or not, and women are going to work and feeling the burdens of males and then shutting their emotions off and knowing what that feels like to live without connecting, which they're really wired and created to do. So I think, men and women are going, and then it looks ugly because it's, once again, like the body is getting rid of the old in it as it goes through its healing. So I think having like a radical acceptance, that doesn't mean you are permitting bad behavior or you're standing up for yourself. And I think that's what the younger guys who didn't grow up in the time or previous times, to me, and plus, I really studied male initiation. I've talked to tribal elders in person. I've been to buffalo dances. Like I said, I've really immersed myself and put myself as a test subject into this kind of thing. But what I realized by all this, like that movie Emerald Forest that came out, and if you've never seen it, it's a great movie. And so this, white kid from America is in Brazil with his dad, and these Indians just pluck him out because they said he looked sad. He looked like, and so then they raised him as a tribal man. Then he ended up saving his own father. I mean, I'm sorry for spoiler alert, I'm giving it away, but there's a holistic approach and there's a radical acceptance of nature or the way we are or where we are. And I think as Westerners, we have a lot of time to sit around and think about things in third tier countries or whatever. So we get into all this existential angst and judgment, and then we end up slowing our own growth down because with the resentment and the judgment, we're not saying, oh, this is men and women getting to their shadow or getting to their male or getting to their female, integrating that and becoming that beautiful flower who's attracting men, but she doesn't need him. And the man is a nice guy with balls. He can say no. He can disappoint his mother. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up, the kind of stealing the key from under your mother's pillow.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys think that's being mean to your mom. And it's really not that. It's disappointing her. It's maybe you had 3 helpings of lasagna for your Italian mother. And then you come over and you're 25 and she gives you a helping and it's a holiday and you're eating the lasagna and then she goes, hey mom, nah, I'm done. Well, you really always had 2 or 3 helpings and now, so she's a little hurt that you don't want her cooking and you're like, well, I'm a big boy now, I've changed. And then just shut up and let her, maybe she cries, maybe she wants you to come over and console her, but you just sit there and you let her be upset. Or another example that was given to me where maybe your dad's dying and your mom's in there and he's in the hospital bed and you want to have this last moment with your dad and you ask your mom kindly to step out of the room so you can speak with your father. And that's taking your power back. That's being a man. And I went on this whole journey where I was able to integrate this stuff, and it's still an ongoing process, but I would encourage younger guys to look at how older tribes did things. And of course there was brutality and just terrible things, of course, but you have to look at things holistically and then throw out the stuff you don't want to keep or that doesn't make sense. And this is part of the critical thinking that's evaporated over the past, 10, 20 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah, I mean, what it sounds like, that quote, by the way, of stealing the key from under your mother's pillow, that comes from Iron John, for the guys watching this, Robert Bly. And it's a metaphor, and I think it's a good way to put it as disappointment. I mean, it's really putting a boundary, right? It's putting the boundary around the feminine that wants to consume, right? It wants to always be merged, and that boundary is really the purview of men. I mean, the perimeter, right? It's so built into us to. I mean, even in the Bible, that it's God gave Adam the right to name. That's like basically saying he gave him the right to define, right? To create a boundary around something. So it's very interesting to think about how these energies play out in practice. It's also interesting to think about how, I think it's important you mention that about men not being mean to their mother with this process, or even be mean to women, because one of the things I see so much in coaching is you have guys who struggle with women, and maybe they're caught in actually this like flip between nice guy versus total asshole. And they, and I think a lot of the manosphere, by and large, doesn't quite, they always get trapped in these dichotomies, and they don't understand that, telling a woman no doesn't mean like fuck you, you stupid bitch. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to go. And look, I give guys a little bit of the leeway, because I do think that in practice, if you're used to not ever speaking up for yourself, you might go a little further at first, just because your voice has been suppressed. But correct as much as possible, because you don't want to become an abusive individual. And
you have to go through that.
Yeah. Now, this is an interesting thing. You had the experience, speaking of women, you had the experience of dating women in a totally different time period.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot to be said about, and look, you don't have to feel as comfortable as you want going into this, but how have women changed? Because there's a really there is a massive doomer patrol on what's happened to women in the West today. And I think some of it is just simply basic fitness. Like, I think as much as people complain in general about the women and sort of the Anglosphere, I think so much of it has to do with the fact that we've just become an obese society, and that if we had removed a lot of that stuff, that there would be less criticism. But even still, even if you remove the fitness angle, even though of course it's interlinked, people have an issue with the attitude of women in the West today, and versus how women were before over here. And I remember, I don't remember, but I know that back in the 1950s, the hottest chicks in the world were American girls.
Especially California girls.
Especially California girls. So what happened? Or did anything happen? Maybe it's still good? What do you think?
I'm going to give you a weird angle that you're probably not going to hear online. And that is, to me, the way I understand women to be wired biologically, and I'm definitely not a scientist, but this is how I kind of understand it, is that women, in a sense, are more, Jordan Peterson has talked about the idea of being more cooperative, and men in general being more, you could say, antagonistic or not going along with the crowd. Men are more maybe iconoclastic, you could say. I say that men have changed and women have followed suit. So, and I'm taking a different angle because I think a lot of men blame women. And I went through that stage in my development. And then I said, I always want to know the truth, even if it hurts, even if it bruises my ego. I want to know what is the truth. And then it hurts maybe, and then you get over it. Once again, the beatings you take when you're younger, you learn to get over things. And I think that's why it's hard for people to find truth these days, along with a lot of other reasons. So we have an 80% overweight in this country. You go any other country, everyone's thinner. Mexico is pretty close to us because they have a similar diet and all that. But the depolarization of men and women. So I'm not, I'm a Gen Xer, so I don't really know. I have a nephew that's a millennial, and I know people with Gen Z kids that are my age, but they have been so depolarized because they've been told that this kind of toxic femininity, well, not really that, but toxic masculinity, and then there is, of course, there's a toxic femininity. If we just got to get rid of that. So this is, once again, trying to get rid of the shadow. It's like that movie, What About Bob? That Bill Murray's The Shadow trying to integrate into the Doctor. And a lot of people don't see it that way. They see it as this annoying guy who was played brilliantly. I don't think anyone else, maybe Michael Keaton could have done that, but no one else could have played that role. So I think men set the course, men set the standard. And so men changed in the sense that I think the society said, you can't be a man, and this is what you can't be. And then so you feel this pressure of society telling you you're just bad, you've caused the wars, the oppression of women, et cetera, et cetera. And once again, it's that polarized thinking where you're just focused. Sorry, I'm getting bombed by calls all day. So you're focusing on the toxic part of women and the toxic part of men, and or I'm broke and I don't have any money. You can do it in a lot of different areas of your life. So men, if men were in shape and men were strong and assertive, and not to saying that they should be, because I can understand why they're not, because most younger men I know don't even want to be mentored by an older man. And I was mentored by men who were from the greatest generation, who were 2 generations up from me. And the reason I chose today, if they were alive, they'd be 101 years old in 97. So they were from a time that was so removed from me that they were shaking all the BS out of me, because they look at me like, why are you worried about that? Why are you sweating that? So in having this openness to having older men teach me about reality, not what the news tells me, not what school tells me, not what my mom and dad tell me, but what's the real deal? And they don't have any vested interest in me. And I'm giving them something and they're giving me something, and we're having an exchange. So what I want to say about this is that if you're a man and you get in shape, as a man, taking responsibility, but not being in guilt or shame. So you're taking responsibility for what's yours. But a lot of people will tell you who you are and who you should be. And part of the thing of Iron John and Robert Bly and what he's talking about, and that kind of hero's journey, or the tribal initiation, because women went through initiation, but it was much different. The male initiation is you are going to go out for 2 weeks or for a month, and they're going to leave you out there. They taught you to hunt fish and survive and build a little domicile for yourself, but you're going to have to face your own death, and you're going to have to face fear of being alone. But with a phone, I'm never alone. With a computer, I'm never alone. I can always have something occupying that space. So men have changed dramatically, but then they're looking at women saying, well, women follow what men do. That's the way they're set up. Mm-hmm. So if they're seeing, maybe, and this is just a point of view, maybe if they're seeing a bunch of men who are more feminine and they can't assert themselves, it's really not their fault. It's just the acculturation. It's more the nurture than the nature. Because I think by nature, we really want to be initiated. We want to be with the older guys and we want to learn. But a lot of those older guys from the baby boom generation that was mentioned in Iron John were competing for the same women and for the same jobs. And they were the most lucrative, wealthy, having the most opportunity, so to speak, from an easy place from society, because it was right after the war and all the production and the baby boom and all that. So I think you really want to take responsibility. You have to be radical in that. Say, I'm radically responsible. So if I know how to flirt with women, if I do the best I can to look good and do the best I can, I think what women want even more from men is you're low key. You're not going to get all excited, because they get more emotional. So if you're calm, like I had this girlfriend about 10 years ago, and they had this celebration when I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that was really, it was like a pagan thing they would do, because it's kind of, they have paganism mixed with Catholicism there, and they burn old man gloom. So you take your parking tickets and maybe your house deed or whatever, and they throw it all in there, and people, they get crazy. So it's a crazy energy. So she was moved from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. So she's like, hey, can you come over and just kind of be around? And so I just maintained, without even really trying, I just maintained, like, this doesn't bother me. And I didn't have to work at it. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't scare me. So, and then she's feeling that energy. And then that's the first time I met her daughter, who was like 18. And she said, that guy, there's something that guy has that no other guy you've been with has. And she didn't know how to articulate it, but I was holding this space of, without being tough or going around and shaking my arms and yelling and screaming or telling how badass I was. No, it's a silence. And I think for men, if they work on this silent knowingness of being centered, grounding your energy, and letting her kind of jump around, you're the frame and she's the picture, so to speak, and she's, or you're the riverbank and she's the river, she will come into your world. But she can't come into your world if you're judging her. She can't come into your world if you're acting like her. Yeah. So, and I think there's a lot of shame of, I should be like that, but I'm not. But I went on like a really hardcore, decades-long journey because it was important to me. And then I was just a student. Hey, what is the truth? So what I would say to guys who are younger is, try to find out. There's a lot of guys online that will, teach you things, and some of it's good and some of it's bad. I think you're really good at what you do. But I think for an older guy too, if it's an older guy, his setting is from 18 to 25 or from 25 to 30. And then you have to kind of grow yourself up out of that. Because the last time I was going out, maybe I was married for 25 years and now I'm divorced. So I think men, if they take responsibility, because what I found, when I made myself more attractive physically, but more emotionally, when I got my emotions straight, when I was grounded in myself, they just feel that. And I have women of all sorts of walks of life, even more now, paying attention to me than they did when I was better looking and younger. Because they want that. We want the looks. We want the beauty. We want that feminine grace, that regalness. They want a guy who is going to be grounded and going to ground their emotions out. And so to me, that more than being buff, having a Ferrari, being really good looking, you could be Danny DeVito. And if you are grounded, women are going to go, wow, what's this? Because you're trying to sell something to somebody that they don't want. But if you sell them, what they're looking for, which is also good for you. So
right.
Bit right. More than you're asking.
No, I mean, that's fantastically put. I mean, everybody needs to take responsibility for their lives, but we know that men in particular, if you have this paradox of a lot of guys who say that they're complaining about women all the time, but at the end of the day, but you believe that women should follow men. So what do you know what I mean? If you believe that, right, you need to get yourself together. You need to act a certain way, and women will be drawn towards it. And while it's not necessarily on its own enough to change a woman's behavior, it is, I would say, it is almost a required piece. It's very difficult. Like I've found observationally, it's very difficult for women to fully come into their feminine unless they have the presence of a man who can do it. They can kind of want to, but there's going to be constantly like a block because of the guys that they're surrounded with won't let them do it. I always find this the Grapes of Wrath, obviously a completely different topic, but there is a scene at the very end, the very, very end of the book, that really stood out to me. And it's basically when the family gives up. Everything bad has basically happened. They've tried, and the men were finally just broken. Like they couldn't get the work or anything. And it was very interesting because then the women snapped into like, okay, I got to take care of things now. And the women tried to preserve what was left of the family when the men basically gave up hope and were no longer capable of leadership. So yeah, I 100%.
And they don't want to do it. They don't
want to do it. They don't want to do it.
They want to help, but they don't want to do it. It's kind of like if I'm in the kitchen and I'm helping you out, it's like, hey, this is, and it sounds old fashioned, but it's like, I think if you have domains, like, okay, she doesn't want to deal with the cars, so you take care of that. You take it to the mechanic, you fill the tires, you fill the gas. I don't want to deal with that. But then if you're sick, I'm going to put gas in the car. And whatever roles that you end up picking, I'm more of a traditional role kind of person, probably because of the time I grew up in, then I'm going to handle that. And I'll be your assistant over here and you'll be my assistant over here. But I think what you're bringing up that really is such a strong thing is that women really want men to be men. But I just think men, they think it's the car or the money and all that. And you could have some of that. And like you've even said before, it can compensate for other places where you're not doing well. But I think ultimately, if you are socially calibrated, like if I go out and I pick up my mail at the P.O. box and I'm flirting with a woman there mildly, they love that because everyone's being so serious, or they're in a hurry, or they're in their phone. And if you're, make a joke or say something like, hey, this is a nice hairdo you got on today, I saw it. And if you can be that kind of, you don't give a damn, and, without being, I think you have to work your way through and be willing. Like when I started selling, I was awful and people wouldn't buy from me because I was, I couldn't talk. I was a mouthful of marbles. But you have to be willing to suck at it and just go out there and be bad and let them laugh at you or look at you like, yeah, dude, nice try. but you have to be willing. But I think the most important thing is having that energy where you're grounded and you're the life of the party, or you're the man, you're running things, and you just have this attitude. But it's not from like so much of a cocky place, but you're sure. And if anything goes wrong, you can handle it. And it's an energy, and you can't fake that. You can.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, a lot of these guys, they're grasping at these various even strict rules and certain things, and she has to do this because they don't get the energy. They don't know what the energy feels like. And the reality is that when you have the energy, you can really set things as you want to set them, because that's what she's going to respond to, and she's going to feel comfortable in it, because it creates that healthy container, rather than you as a man arguing or telling a woman that she needs to do this or this, which the subcommunication of that is that, well, if you were the kind of man that, embodied that, then I would be doing it. But anyway, changing tact. I mean, so you mentioned sales stuff, and you mentioned, it sounds like sales is how you emerged out of this. I mean, not that the exploratory period ever ends, but sales is what really took you out of this long period where it was like odd job here or there, whatever, just to get by. And sales is a really interesting thing because every profession, there's always good and evil in it, but sales in particular has, I would say, unfairly, a negative connotation to it. And because there's very different energy that people bring to bear in sales. And so you have these different also philosophies within it that, for how much of it is you going after the person, trying to persuade the person, versus how much of it is you letting them come to you. And I'm sure it's a mix of these both things, but I'm interested in your experience with it. Tell us the wisdom.
Yeah, I'd like to first lay the groundwork a little bit.
Wait, before you go into it, I just want to say this because this is really important for guys. Right now, in 2022, economy, big shift, etc., there's a lot of questions about what guys should do for work and what kind of job they should have, and how can they break out of the system. A lot of guys want to start their own business, and I think it's a good idea. Right? It is the future. It will be the future. However, there's always this debate, like, university degree, unless you're going into like very specific STEM stuff, it's not worth it. Maybe you should go do a trade instead. But, trades are very hard on the body. And it seems to me that if there is any skill that you want to learn and you don't know what to do, but you want to be independent, financially independent, and you want to have unlimited upside, and you don't want to get automated out, it's sales. Sales is probably the most important skill you can learn, because even if you start a business in a completely different thing, you got to learn sales. I mean, I got to learn sales. Like, I think I'm a decent salesperson, but I'm constantly getting better at it, right? But I also want to sell with integrity. So anyway, go into your thing. I just wanted
to. Well, first of all, I think learning to sell was one of the most, I'd say, career-wise, business-wise, money-wise, sales is the best thing you could ever learn. Why? It brings out all your weaknesses. So yeah, go work a trade. You're going to be physical. You're going to weld. You're going to be a pipe fitter. Not a big struggle for a man. This is emotional toughness you have to have as a salesman, because when you start out, you suck and people won't buy from you. And I worked on commission, full commission, or hourly in commission. And I would make $10 an hour plus commission. And, I lived in Hawaii and Santa Fe, New Mexico, and different that are expensive. And I would never make it on 10 an hour, even living in the dump of an apartment that you could live in the town. So what it is really, and if you look at even in a masculine, feminine way, no matter whether you're a man or woman, when you're selling, you're in a masculine role. And the feminine role is the salesperson. So it's also going to sharpen your masculinity, because you're going to have to be vulnerable. And for me, my first real sales job, like I said, I grew up lower middle class. So I was in a jewelry store in Hawaii at a resort full of rich people. of which to me, I did not understand because I didn't know rich people growing up. I worked for rich people, but I didn't really know them. And I saw them as these higher than thou kind of people. So here I am, I'm making, it was $11 an hour plus 4% commission. So I got to sell. And it's not cheap. And once again, I'm trying to shop from my wallet. Gee, can you really afford this Rolex for 10 grand? Can you really afford this necklace for 2,500? That's an anniversary gift for your wife. So I had so much low self-esteem and fear. I would break out in like hives, but I had to go in there. So I will tell you, when you start your own online business or something like that, and that's your first experience with sales, it's one thing. When you have to stand there and it's your job and you have to show up and you can't scoot out and say, I don't feel like doing it today, and you got to go in 5 days a week. So I recommend young people to get a job that has an hourly and a commission. I wouldn't send someone straight to a commission only. I worked my way up to that, but it can be lucrative. But what I'm saying is that if you come in and work like at a jewelry store or something where they sell nice stuff so you can make some money, and if you do that for a year even, you're going to have a pretty good idea. It takes usually probably 5 or 6 years to really get good at it, maybe 10 years to really start to master it. I did it for 14 years, so I worked at a master level, but there's always something you can learn, okay? So basically, it teaches you everything you need to learn about life, because you have to go, hey, Mr. Client, buy this for me. It's $2,500 and it's going to go on your wife's neck. Now, for some people, if you grew up wealthy or upper middle class, not a big deal. Your mom might have had those kind of necklaces, and yeah. So what I had to do in this first sales job is I also had to bring in women that I knew to test putting the necklace and the tennis bracelet and the rings, so I could be smooth with the clasp, because I don't wear jewelry. Right? So my manager told me to do that. So I brought him in and I had these women. So then my manager said, look, and this is 2005 or so. So once again, not so hyper the way it is now. She goes, put the necklace on the woman and don't ask permission. And I thought, wow, this is breaking a barrier here. So I remember the first customer, I took this necklace and it was a lariat and it was made of white gold with sapphires. It was my favorite thing to sell. And I sold a ton of those because I loved it. So I put it on her. And then she said, put your hands on her shoulders, because women love physical touch, but you can't be creepy about it. So she said, put your hands on her shoulder like this. Don't hold on, but just tick. And so I did that. And then I noticed the connection. And then she's like, well, what do you think? I said, wow, you look gorgeous. Or I'd say, let's try rose gold. Let's try yellow gold, the white gold with your eyes. Okay, wow, that's it. Yellow gold. And she's like, okay, great, let's do it. So I'm kind of I have a lot to say about sales, but the main thing when I was working with all women, and I had all female customers pretty much, except a guy buying a gift for a wife he couldn't bring to the hotel for whatever thing. He worked for Pepsi and he couldn't bring his wife or whatever. So most of the time I was selling to women. And then when you're selling something like that, it's not practical, so they don't need it. So sometimes you just have to learn to talk to people. Hey, what are you doing on the island? Have you done anything fun? Have you been surfing? Have you done any swam with the turtles, gone snorkeling? And that's how it starts. And then after a while, you say, so by the way, is there anything in here that you were looking at? Yeah, I was really like that necklace for my wife. Oh, cool. And then you try to find common ground. Maybe they're from the same state that you're from originally or whatever. So it's teaching you how to build rapport. It's teaching you how to stand there and learn to just fumble through stuff to say. And then you're selling stuff, you're making money. And I remember the first big sale I had was $13,000, which was completely unbelievable. And it was in one whack. And it was this couple and they didn't want it to talk to me at all. But I kept persisting. But I'd back off, push, pull. And then the third time I went up, I said, what have you guys been doing here? And they told me all these activities. I said, well, what brought you to Hawaii? So I'm staying away from trying to sell them anything. And then they say, well, we built a business, took 5 years, no vacations, no days off, and we're here to have fun, buy some stuff, and party. And I said, great, what were you checking out? So I ended up selling the guy a cheaper Rolex and then the woman a bunch of jewelry, and it was 13 grand. And to me, what that taught me is I wasn't trying to get anything from them necessarily. I was just curious about them. And how this correlates to me with dating is that if you just go up to a woman and start talking with her because you're genuinely interested in her and you don't have a attachment to her doing something, I find with women, the more time you're around them, the more they feel safe or interested in you, because a lot of times they just don't see things about you. But so then you have to kind of be around them. And I'd have to build very fast rapport, 5-10 minutes, and I'd have to feel like an old friend, because a lot of people want to buy from somebody that they feel like they like or they know. So this can get into people pleasing and be weird too, which I was kind of in more at the time. But you can also work that to your advantage. So to me, sales, as far as a skill, if you're going to build your own business, selling stuff that's yours, like your content, like Pat selling his content, is much more difficult than selling someone else's product, because you have no attachment to it, meaning that you didn't make it, and the rejection is not a big a deal when you're selling someone else's product. And as I'm transitioning into my own business, I'm seeing that's a big struggle. But my business coach has told me, yeah, I felt the same way. But luckily, before having my own business, I can go right now to any luxury business or a car lot or whatever, and they'll want to hire me on the spot, and I'll get the job, and I'll start producing in the first week. Now, it's a tremendous skill, and I don't know how much I could transmit this to you, but it really brought me out of my shell. It gave me a lot more confidence, a lot more courage. I was working in Santa Fe selling art, and these, girl group, girl vacations they do. They would come in, and I'd be like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're going, "This is a confident guy. He's talking to us. He knows it." They would think it's my gallery, and I'd show them all around. And then at the end, they usually wouldn't buy anything because it's like a girls' trip. But I'd say, "Hey, what are you guys doing tonight?" And then they go, "Oh, well, we don't really know. What do you know?" I'm like, "Well, I know this really great restaurant. We can all go over and have some food, and I'll kind of show you around a little bit." So I could, there's no sale there, but I'm parlaying it into something else. So to me, sales marries well with meeting women, because you can't really want anything. Like when you're selling something on a high level, you can't, when you were working with millionaires and billionaires, everyone wants something from them all the time. Just like women, guys are always wanting women's attention, sex, go out on a date, to talk to me. And they're like, So what I found by working, especially in the luxury business, when I'm working with millionaires and some billionaires, I would not be in this kind of place. And it's all about you. And I'm asking you about, what is your house like? What walls do you have available? Do you have a second home? And so if you have that more tact with women, like, so what do you like to do? Or, how do you, what's like growing up in your family? Or do you, and just, it doesn't have to be anything, monumental, especially at first. And then you're kind of like seeking first to understand her, and then her understand you. And I find this is universal in everything. So sales has so many things that it totally changed my life and has allowed me to start my own business, because I couldn't imagine trying to sell, like, and not having any experience and no training or anything. And I went through role playing, and role playing is the best to me sales training, that I can do a whole show on that. But there's something about that it makes you open to people. It teaches you social emotional connection. You have to connect with a person to sell to them. And then you just get a confidence. And I've, done thousands of presentations, and then, you're selling something for $5,000 and 50 grand. And so then you have to get over, oh my gosh, I did like my first $100,000 deal. I was sweating, and the guy wrote me a check. He was a billionaire oil and gas guy from Texas. And I'm like, "Hey, if you give me a deal, if I write a check," I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And he just reaches in his drawer and just writes a check for like 102 grand. So I went from selling like men's clothing in a mall to selling women's jewelry to selling art. And it was a fantastic experience. There's times I made $3,000 or $4,000 in 3 or 4 hours. So there's, you can make money. It gives you a sense of freedom. If you're good, you could say, "Look, I don't feel like coming in today," or "I'm going to take this weekend off." "Oh, we really need you." I said, "Yeah, I need a break." But they want you, if you can produce. But the thing is all your weaknesses will come out. And if you can face them without feeling bad, or, like you're, something's wrong with you and you just suck, and everyone sees it. Everyone watches, "Yeah, you suck." All the other people watching you, all the other salespeople who are selling way beyond you, "Yeah, you suck, man." It's like, okay, but I'm going to get there and I'm going to beat you. That was my attitude.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting how I've actually never heard it framed like that before, about how sales is a masculine thing. And God, it's so, or at least, it is so true. I know that when women sell, they have their own little seduction that they do too. But it's interesting also to think about how we all know that women are the biggest buyers by far than men. And I think it really gets to the heart of it, of how they respond to that energy. Right.
Let me put this in there, because you're triggering something. The first job I had, this sweet Southern belle from Tennessee came to work there. And I rose up even I didn't know what I was doing, but I just was nice to people and they bought from me. And she came in and just destroyed me because she sold, because women can sell in a masculine way, but they don't do really well. But if you sell from a feminine place, a man has no chance against you.
Yeah, no chance, no chance.
Yeah. But when you're talking about being masculine and feminine, here's what I mean. You're coming to me, you're going to have a moment of insanity. Maybe they want to buy coaching from you and they're afraid. They're afraid to spend the money. It's irrational fears. And you are holding the energy of that masculine energy of letting the customer go, oh, but maybe I have to take this money out of this account. And then if I, maybe if I make payments or I borrow the money, and you let them go through that without trying to rush it and get the result. And saying, oh, so tell me more about that. And then you welcome objections and you want them to tell you, so they'll share their fears and the vulnerabilities, not so you can beat them and overcome them, but you can address them. And this is like what a man does or what a father does is with your woman. It's like, she's like, well, I want to go out with you, but you seem like a player. It's like, well, I'm a player, but maybe I'd be willing to change for you. And you can make a joke out of it or whatever, and she's going, wow, he's kind of relaxed. And if you can maintain that as a salesman, it's the masculine energy. You're holding the space for them to go through their insanity and emotions.
So here's a question. So yeah. with sales, yeah. I think I'm a decent salesperson, but I'm not very good at selling things I don't like. I don't enjoy. And I know that everybody sells things better when they enjoy them. Yeah. But how do you sell something that you don't at all like? And I'll just give a little preface here. So I have my own business, right? Obviously, I like what I sell. Although there is something I'll add with that in a little bit. But there was a period of time where I had to do it in the early years of my business because it just wasn't, it was early stages and I was figuring it out and it wasn't performing well, right, in the early years. And I ended up getting a job as a wine salesman at this small company. And it worked well because it had flexible hours. So I could kind of do both my business and at the same time. But what was so interesting about it was that I mean, for the most part, I really did appreciate the wines I was selling. They were these organic and biodynamic French wines. They were all boutique, very niche producers. It wasn't some sort of mass scale stuff. But I had to go door to door in Manhattan and Brooklyn, across New York, and to these various retailers and obviously some of the wines, because they had a better pedigree, they sold pretty well. I didn't have to necessarily do too much, but other ones, especially the ones that I myself, they were from a smaller producer and they were kind of like meh, you know what I mean? I had a hard time selling them. So I'm curious about how you sell things you don't like. Okay,
let me start with this. I didn't like jewelry. I had no relation to jewelry. The girls I dated, I never bought them jewelry. That's just the way it was. So I was kind of more out to lunch on that kind of stuff. So I didn't like jewelry. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. And I'm selling it to rich people. So not only do I not know the product, I don't really give a damn. And I'm selling to people I don't understand. So I'm in a triple whammy. So how did I do it? I said, how can I help this person? I'm here. I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here to learn something. So what can I find in this jewelry that I can love? So then what I did is I saw that when couples, there was a blind guy looked like Andre Bocelli. And he was blind. And he looked like him. And his wife was saying the rings that she wanted. So I just said, maybe I should remember. And so I remembered the rings she liked the most. And then he called me later and he said, hey, my friend, do you remember what she liked? I go, I remember what her favorite ring was. He goes, can you gift wrap that? And then I'll give you my credit card and can you bring it to my room like in the next 15 minutes because she's at the pool and I want to give it to her because it's our 15th anniversary. So I'm like, cool. So I'm helping people stay together or get together or whatever, or creating a special moment. So I would look for how could I be of service? Because that's just kind of how I came in anyway. And then, okay, how do I make the best of this? So I started to really pay attention, or like women would come in and I'd put this ring on them. They're like, oh God, why'd you do that? Now I got to take it. I'm like, American Express, MasterCard, I take it all, So what I started to find was people were buying a piece for somebody special. It was their anniversary. Just things like that. And then even when I sold art, I would have memorial pieces. I used to sell wind sculptures, kinetic sculptures. And this guy who the owner of the gallery knew, wife died and was like 30 years old. So, and it was a quick thing. It was like food poisoning in another country. So he said, I'm going to send the mom in. And like nobody wanted to do it. I said, I can do it. So I went out there and I helped this grieving mother pick a memorial piece. And it was this kinetic sculpture that she was going to put in her yard in memory of her daughter. So what I would do is just say, I like art. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of jewelry. It's just, I mean, I now I understand and I get it. I learned all about pearls. And so what I just would try to do is find, if I don't really like it necessarily, and if it's something that has to be integrous, there can't be like a mafia operation or something, but I just find like, what is the thing I can't see that's giving me a way to help people? I don't know if that's where you were looking at, but
no, that's great. The only kind of question is that, and this would, I'll tell you what I think the answer would be, at least for me, but I know that some guys don't have the luxury of it. So you didn't know anything about jewelry. You didn't necessarily care about jewelry, right, at all. But you weren't like, this stuff is actively harming the customer. So
well, you could look at it that way because all that blood diamond stuff, but you can always look at it that way.
So basically, no matter what you're selling, you always have to focus on how it benefits the customer, right?
Yeah.
What about
you give me your money?
Right. But what about when you have backroom pressure? So on one hand, you want to try to serve the customer, but the backroom's trying to get you to push a certain product.
Ooh, excellent question. So I always tell people you got to sell the customer and sell the owner or sell the manager. So what I would do is I get a negotiating battle. So let's say someone wants to buy a fountain and $16,000, and maybe that fountain, nobody really cares and thinks it's ugly, but this person has a huge 20,000 acre property or house, 20,000 square foot home. They want to put it in the front as a centerpiece on a horseshoe driveway. But no one else really wants it. So I go to them and say, do you want to go ahead and get it? Well, we want a deal. Well, let me go talk to the owner and see what I can do. So now I got to sell it to him. I know what you're saying, but I'm going to get to that. And then he's like, but I don't have that much of a spread on it. I'm going 60-40 because of the materials. Okay, so you're only getting 40% of the deal. No one's looked at this fountain. No one's even asked me beyond what it costs. And it's been here for a year. So it's taken up real estate in your gallery.
Yeah.
And nobody wants it. This person's willing to give me 13 grand. They're willing to write a check. So that saves you 3% on the credit card. And they're willing to have it delivered by the artist who's already going to Houston. They're living in Waco and they don't even want it installed. They just want it put in their barn because the house isn't finished. So what do you think? He's like, yeah, do it. So you got to sell them. So now quotas, if you have a quota, there's that pressure. So the way you have to look at it is, first of all, it's not your boss that's the problem. It's you, because you're looking at the negative side of not hitting it. In some places, I've worked at places where the quotas are like unreal. Like where you're going, even I'm going, well, I don't know, we'll see. But if you just stick with, if I serve the customer, that pressure goes away, because if I'm genuinely curious and I genuinely want to help people, but I'm not afraid to receive, I'm not afraid to get and to make the deal, I'm going to be fine. So at times early on, I didn't make my quota and I'd say, well, I'm new. And my manager was like, yeah, for the first year, you're going to be new. I didn't know how much I had to learn. So the backroom pressure is being put on you. So are you going to put that on yourself? Okay, go right ahead. And then you're going to tank, and then you're going to get fired, and then you're going to blame your boss. But the bottom line is you have to learn to live in that tension as a man. There's always something on the line, always. But this is not like your life, or you're not running for your life or in a war or on the streets. So you have to, this is your reptile brain once again reacting and overreacting, because maybe you'll be put out on the street and but you can borrow money, you have a credit card, you'll get by. You'll always get what you need because your subconscious is set for getting your lifestyle that you already get now. So you have to frame it, and you're always having to frame things, because if your reptile mind, hijacks you, you can think of all, and you'll end up homeless, dying behind a trash can in a bad neighborhood. Okay, so you can take it all the way, and that's what it's really, fear of death is what it goes to. So I think it's talking to yourself, coaching yourself, learning how to cope with that, and then negotiating so you don't lose deals. I had a manager who said, don't ever bring me lowball deals. And then everyone said, yeah, man, last time someone did that, it was bad. But I was well into my career and I don't care what he thinks. I don't care. I'm here to make money. And I was getting 7% plus a pretty decent hourly. So I had this guy call me up on an $80,000 sculpture. Now, there was only 2 left in the edition because they're all limited editions, and that's what also creates the value. And this guy, cannot justify spending that kind of money. And, so I'm at a professional level and a high level, and I'm able to massage him into giving me an offer. So he gives me an offer and I take it. And so we go back and forth, and I brought him a low ball offer. He offered 55 grand. And I called the guy and I said, hey man, I don't know if you need to bring any money in the business today. I don't know. I just work for you. But I have somebody with real money and somewhat of a beginning spot in negotiation. So do what you got to do. But that's the attitude you have to have. And he said, give me a few minutes. And he hung up and slammed the phone down. So are you going to feel hurt? Is this my dad yelling at me? You got to remember, make your bills. So you have your own pressures. So then he calls me back and he says, I would do it for 60 if he writes a check. So I call him back and he's like, and I said, look, can you come up to 57? I need a best and final. He's like, okay, I'll do 56 and I'll FedEx you and overnight you a check today for half. And then once it's fired, I'll send you the balance and you can ship it to me. I said, great. So I called him. Let me call you back, slam, and then so you have to live in that tension. You don't know, and it's fun. I ended up digging it because it's kind of exciting because life is boring usually most of the time anyway. So I started to get a thrill out of it. And then he called me back. He's like, all right, rah, 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 rah. And then he hung up the phone. Then everyone's like, you can't do that. See, you're cheating. And so then all the other salespeople were thinking but see, you have to break the rules, but you have to know which rules to break. So if someone tells you don't do this, okay. Am I going to listen to that? Well, sometimes you do. Sometimes those are valid boundaries, and that's the socio-emotional knowingness that you have to cultivate over years. But to me, if he's going to yell at me and I'm going to make, $4,000 on one deal, which one's more painful? You can yell at me, and then I'll put my check and laugh all the way to the bank. But that comes with time.
So one more sales questions for you, because I know we're about to wrap up, but this is an important one. So for me, with sales, for me, I don't negotiate. So just for people, with my own products, I don't negotiate. And I do that also for the fairness of every client, so that people who are coming in during that time period are all going to get the same deal, the same rate. And I understand also at this point, I mean, when you really believe in something you have, the great thing about it is it creates a profound lack of need. And so you're really able to let people walk away. If they don't see the value in it, or they're just not ready, then that's okay. Right. And you can exist with that tension. Obviously, maybe the value could have been better conveyed, and that's good salesmanship. Right. But here's a question, because this is actually a practical question, because I'm very much a believer in polarity marketing. I like to push people away and see what comes back as a result of pushing away. But when somebody, it would be really good for them, and that they're kind of on, they're a good fit, they're kind of on the fence, and they need a few days to think about it. And I always give a very set amount of time for that, because you don't want to have it be this open-ended thing. What happens at that point? Do you how do I put this? Do you close the door at that point so that you maintain a level of integrity with it? Do you, because the thing is about this, and maybe there's a level of personal preference, is that I don't like it. I understand it as a tactic, but I don't like it when people say, okay, doors close in X number of hours, and then, if you don't get back to me then we're done. You know what I mean? It sounds like it felt to me too desperate. There were some times when I tried to play around with those things, and I felt like there was some sort of unconscious response to rejection actually coming through with it. So then the flip side would be, well, okay, they're not there, then you just leave it. Whatever, you're not going to show any neediness. But then there's a level of practical follow-up, right? That maybe. So I'm curious about how you deal with the subtleties in this kind of situation. Help me out, maybe get me.
Yeah. Well, I would say you really sit with the question of why you don't like the time period ending, and you may get some answers. What is the need behind to not do that? I think when you understand that most people you're going to be dealing with, they're not poor, but they're not probably rich. So there needs to be some kind of motivation. So modern day marketing, the reason they have 20% off, and I'm not saying to discount, because in your realm it doesn't work, but there's a reason.
I could do it. People do it. I just don't do it.
Or what you can do is you could say, look, it's X amount of dollars, and if you sign up in this session, I'll give you unlimited email or whatever your perk would be. So you could give away bonuses. Not that you want to do that.
I give no perk.
Right. But if you want to give a perk to act now, I'm just giving you ideas.
Yeah.
That's totally up to you. But what I'm saying is, you never want, and I've worked for people who do this. They have a sale ending on Sunday. It's Sunday at 6 o'clock when we close, and then someone would call in Monday and they would bend down to it. And then you just create, and then you don't look like you're for real. And they start to wonder if the product they're buying is really worth it. Right. So you have to have the self-esteem. So I can understand in your business, my business, you don't want a discount, but you could add bonuses. And that's what people do in our industry. So if you want people to pay in full, if your customers can do that, great. But then you may have a payment system, and that's also a thing. If they pay X amount of dollars, maybe for a 3-month or a 6-month or whatever, it doesn't matter what the details are. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. I think payment plans are not bad in coaching, but if you're going to get a full payment and you want a full payment, you should give them a reason to make a full payment. And then if they're going to go away and think about it, I think that's the biggest thing. And this comes with a lot of experience, and I have a lot of experience, so I could say what I would do. So you have to ask a question like, for you, so customer, Mr. Customer, what do you really want? Well, I want, and they're going to give you a bunch of diagnosis. I'm a nerd. I'm a tech guy. I'm a this and that. Okay, no, I get it. I understand that. But what do you really want? If you could get whatever you wanted from a woman, what would that be? Well, I really want to be married to this woman who's feminine, and then she cooks and she never complains. So I say, good luck. But anyway, so that's what you want. Why do you think you're not getting it? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, because I work for 80 hours a week. I'm busy. I don't look very good. I got a beer gut, whatever it is. So, or they may blame the women and say, well, women these days are different, and they really don't want to date a guy like me. So now you're dealing with a victim. So do you want to have a victim as a client? So then that's where you make your decision. So if the person's not a victim or not too much of a victim, then it's basically like, what's going to happen if you don't do this now? Mm-hmm. And then they're like, well, I'm probably going to be alone, and I'm going to eat up another 5 years dating, not knowing what I'm doing and not having someone to talk to. But, it's really more money than I want to spend. Well, what do you think it would cost you to learn this all on your own, and how much time, and probably more of a time sink? What would that be? So you always have to be keeping it about them and what they're not getting. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, and it's not that you're being manipulative, but you're really saying like, look, we have 20, 30 minutes to have this conversation. If we're on the phone, you're serious enough, you're qualified to buy. So what is it really? And then when they get to the point of telling you, well, I really don't have the money. Cool. Well, let me help you find a way to get the money. Mm-hmm. So you're always offering solutions. So what's your credit card limit? Okay, it's $10,000. Okay, so let's say it's $5,000 or whatever. Okay, so just put it on your card and make the payments. And what's your interest rate? Okay, well, you'll handle that. And the faster you pay it off, you don't want to get too involved with it, but you're giving them options, because if you keep waiting, then you're going to get older. You're going to, and you're going to be not knowing as much, or whatever the reasons for them to sign up, and you just stay with them until they give up. And if they have to go and think about it, that's okay. We call that a be back. I mean, that's okay. Maybe, a lot of people say, well, I can't spend more than $500 unless me and my wife agree on it. Well, if it's single guys, that's not the case. If you don't have a girlfriend, or maybe you have a girlfriend and you're having problems and you have to talk to her, but are you going to tell her? You're going to hire a dating coach to try? And that's all, like, you have to figure that part out. But it's really just sticking with them until they give up, and almost till they hang up on you. But you're not putting pressure on them. Is this going where do you need some?
I think what you're saying is really profound, and the big thing with it is also how much of it, you have the science of sales, but then you have the art. and knowing with one individual, like, if you put that extra pressure on him, is that genuine? Is that like he needs that at that moment? He needs to really face himself.
Just let me clarify this. So when you say, how can I help you get the money? That's going to tell you whether he really wants it or not.
Yeah,
because it's and you can say, hey man, are you like flat broke, or you don't have the money for this?
Yeah.
What could you do without for the next 6 months to improve your love life? Yeah. You see, so because you value what you sell, and I know you do, then like Jay Abrams said, you know, you got to see it as like, this is the Holy Grail. I'm saving lives, you know, whatever you got to tell yourself. And then you're doing that by saying, so is it that you're broke and you have nothing in the bank and no credit, or is it you don't have money for this? And then see, this is where this separates the wheat from the chaff. Is it the money, or is it something they're really not willing to do? And that's going to tell you, and then you won't feel like you lost it because you were afraid of rejection, or you didn't have the skill to do it. But it's having the balls to go that far with it. Where a lot of people, like if I asked for, like I had this instant date, and I went up to this woman and we're just chit-chatting. It's me and my brother, and we're having a good time, and she's selling a car, but it's not at a car lot, and And I'm like, hey, you want to join us for dinner? And she's like, oh, but your brother's in town. I said, you know, I've known him all my life, and I know all the good and the bad. I've heard enough.
Yeah.
You got one shot. You going or not?
Yeah.
It's like, okay. But so it's like, are you willing? And my first mentor or second mentor told me, you have to always be willing to walk away from a deal. And that's the person who has the power. So if you have money in the bank and your house is paid for and you're not on the edge, it's like feeling into that, but ultimately serving the customer at the same time. So you're saying, okay, you don't have any money, then you really, they're not your customer. Or are you not willing to spend it on this?
No, I mean, it's great. And it is nice to when you get to certain. Oh, sorry. I think we cut out for a second.
If not now, when are you going to be? When you're a year from now, and then you're more socially inept, or maybe you forget about it. How important is it? So it's sticking until the point. You know, I had a trainer who says, talk to them until they hang up on you, but you don't have to be pushy. But you're just having the guts to ask them the questions, and you're holding the space, and you're not shaming them, or you're letting them be vulnerable. Yeah. Which you already know how to do for a coach. If you wouldn't be a good coach if you couldn't let people be vulnerable. But in the sales process, it's a scary thing. And that's why it's important, I think, to learn and to master, because it just gives you unlimited power. You could go up to the president of the United States and say, hey, Mr. President, how's it going? And he feels like, oh, I can talk to this guy because he doesn't want something from me. You know, I had these rich friends that were decamillionaires. And when I moved away from where I used to live, they took me out to a very fine restaurant. It was like $400 for the bill. And I pull out my credit card. They're like, we got it. This is your go away thing. Cool. And they paid me the highest compliment because I just live this way now. They said, you know, everyone asks us for money, family, friends, everybody, all the time. And it's exhausting. And you've never done that. And I said, no, it just never even occurred to me. They said, we know. So it's like, you have to become the person who does this, whatever the result, but you'll find the results coming in your favor because they'll feel you energetically, not attaching to them at all, but you're also not pushing them away.
Right. And that is the tension point. And it's also cool because of the subcommunication of it, that when you're in that tension point, you're actually showing them, but you're almost coaching them in the sales process itself, because they're having to face themselves in the sales process. And yeah, it's great stuff, Clint. So I got to jump to a dinner. So this has been a good talk. Tell the guys here where they can find you. And you do sales coaching, business coaching, correct?
Yes. And also mindset of who you need to learn to be. So it's who you have to be to do what you have to do to have what you want to have. So it's going to be mindset as well as actual sales skills. So what I would say is, in the show notes, I think somewhere in here you have my YouTube channel. That's one way. But I'd say the best way to get me is my email. It's excelcoach@gmail.com. So that's X as in X-ray, S as in Sam, E-L as in Larry, L as in Larry, coach@gmail.com. That's the best way if you're interested.
That's also going to be in the description. And one of the things I want to just emphasize for you guys, okay, and I'm sure Clint's not going to mind me saying this, but this is somebody you could tell from this last segment here. Clint has incredible sales experience, sold. I mean, how much revenue worth of stuff would you say you've sold in those 14 years?
Millions.
Billions. Okay, so you have your
Billions.
stupid little
Billions, but
Twitter
billions.
gurus. No,
With an M.
I got to say this because a lot of these guys are on Twitter. I know you're not on Twitter, but on Twitter, every other week you have a new like 6-figure, you know, sales. And half of them are scams. Most of these guys are basically just doing the absolute rudimentary stuff. A lot of things that they're doing are wrong. They don't have anywhere close to this experience. And Clint is just pivoting into this world. So what happens when someone's really good at something is that they end up being worth quite a bit to work with them. So if you know, we've talked about sales and how important sales are for guys today. You know, if you're starting your own business or if that you just want to simply go that route, it's certainly, people are going to give you more of a chance if you know how to sell. You're like, super strong recommend that you guys take advantage of this opportunity to work with somebody who at this point has not built up the business. We're like a few weeks in. So get on it. Reach out to Clint. Check out his channel. There's going to be more and more videos put up there on sales and other related business and mindset things, because as you could also tell from this last segment, you can't really do good sales unless your mindset's in the right place. And of course, this will help you out with women too, because sales and game are two sides of the same coin. So anyway, Clint, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Take care, and I'll see you.
All right. Take care.